time for how they built this, where we talk about a program and how they built this. And right now, Drew, no better program to talk about than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 7-0, 3-0 in conference play in the ACC, coming off a big win against Syracuse, where they won that game 41-13. And Drew, one of the more interesting stories right now in the country is the group that Pat Narduzzi has. And you've kind of dug in on it a little bit because this is not a program right now that had a ton of continuity coming into the season. It's one of those coming off a tough season last year in 2023 where they've kind of moved some things around and they're having a lot of success because of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget, Cooper, that Pittsburgh won the ACC back in 2021. Last year, 3-9. They have to hit reset. And what Pat Narduzzi did is he went outside his comfort zone, right? And he hired Cade Bell, a 31-year-old offensive coordinator from Western Carolina that had one of the top offenses at the FCS ranks. They bring in Eli Holstein, the Alabama transfer at quarterback. And Cooper, I had an opportunity to listen to Pat Narduzzi speak this offseason. He was in Orlando, making the rounds, talking to high school coaches. And on the agenda, it just said 90 minutes, Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi on hot. I had no idea what he was going to say. It just said hot. It was a 90-minute film session, him talking about his defense, right? It's the 3 under, 2 deep, right? Limit the indicators of where you're going to blitz. But the biggest thing is Pat Narduzzi's defense doesn't ask his defenders to think. That's big because Cade Bell's offense, right? It is a air raid. Not a lot of thinking on that side of the ball either. You look up at Pittsburgh right now, they rank 25th nationally in total offense. They were 116th last season, 56th in total defense, 51st last season. They're 11th nationally in scrimmage plays of 40-plus yards. And the D is tied for 11th in tackles for loss and 20th nationally in sacks, right? So they're doing it. And I think what they were able to accomplish in the transfer portal isn't talked about enough here, Cooper. Cade Bell, he brought a couple really good guys with him from Western Carolina. Desmond Reed, the all-purpose back. Sincere Lee, the wide receiver. Also gets Ralph Williams, who started off at Western Carolina before going to San Diego State. Those 2 receivers scored against Syracuse. Obviously, the defense made things very difficult for Kyle McCord. But I just think what Pat Narduzzi, how he was able to recalibrate. We're talking about a guy that's been at Pittsburgh for 10 years in the Steel City. He put his ego aside. He made the changes, and you look up now, they're 7-0 in the hunt for potentially an ACC title. And who knows, maybe they can get into the college football playoff conversation.
All right, you brought up the idea, what I thought was interesting about Cade Bell in Pittsburgh and Pat Narduzzi hiring him away from FCS school in Western Carolina. You mentioned Desmond Reed, Sincere Lee as well. Is this something that we see in the future, right? Florida State definitely probably going to make some changes after this season. You would think so. And maybe that's just a program that comes to mind. But a guy like Mike Norvell, think about bringing a guy like Brennan Marion over from UNLV. And if he's got a couple guys that want to tag along with him, maybe it's a good way to kind of jumpstart your offense a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of fan bases, right, as we get closer to the end of November, December, when there's firings and hirings. Like, I think if you're a college football fan and, hey, my team isn't going to make a bowl game, my head coach is going to have to make a change because he's got some buyout, you're kind of searching for that group of 5 coordinator, that FCS coordinator who can bring some individuals with them. And it's not just Pittsburgh that's done this, Cooper, with the Western Carolina transfers. How about at Indiana, right? All those guys they brought in from James Madison, Indiana's undefeated. So I do think in this current environment, this current landscape where player movement is at an all-time high, I mean, how many, who else is going to be looking to capitalize on a coach that can bring multiple parts with them? And I'm not just talking about like 1 or 2 players, a core of an offense, a core of a defense, because it's working at Pittsburgh and it's working there at Indiana, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I do think that is certainly something as we get to the coaching carousel season. I call it silly season. Keep an eye on that, right? Who's getting linked to where and which players could they bring with them to a new spot?
Yeah, we got to give a ton of credit not only to Cade Bell, Pat Narduzzi, that entire staff. How about Eli Holstein, Drew, former top 247 quarterback, transfers from Alabama? This is a guy that was kind of dinged in the evaluation process because he had a little bit of a mechanical throwing motion. He was a lot better athlete than I think a lot of people thought. Kind of struggled at the Elite 11 finals in LA. You kind of toss him aside a little bit. He goes to Alabama. He's a forgotten man, transfers to Pitt. Don't really know what the fit's going to look like. You look up, all of a sudden, Drew, his first year as a starter, he's 7-0. Pitt's ranked in the top 20.
I've heard from someone there at Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein has exceeded all expectations. I don't think they thought he would be this good. And Cooper, what was funny after that win over Syracuse, obviously that hot defense kind of was the story of the night. You said it, the 3 pick sixes. I mean, they made it where Syracuse couldn't do anything. Pat Narduzzi was upset that Eli Holstein and Cade Bell's offense couldn't find a flow, right? The defense was scoring too much. It took a while for the offense to get going. And if you've ever been around Pat Narduzzi, you see how fired up he gets. Get him on a film clicker and just have him break down plays. It's awesome. But for a coach that's wired that way, to be a little upset that they're not scoring enough points, I just think it's a bit ironic. And it shows that he truly is changing and adapting his program to remain competitive in the ACC.
Yeah, there you see the odds there for Pittsburgh to win the ACC currently at plus 1,800. You know the boys like to mix it up every now and then. We might get in on that action. Drew, but the remaining schedule here, you got at SMU in Dallas, UVA at home, Clemson at home, which will be a big game, at Louisville, at Boston College. So realistically, let's start with the ACC. What do you think the odds are that Pittsburgh can run the table here and win the ACC championship, find themselves in a college football playoff?
Well, Coop, I think they match up well with these teams that are on the schedule, right? Clemson's the one that kind of sticks out, but again, that hot defense, a lot of eye candy, a lot of disguise. Cade Klubnik, I mean, he's had a heck of a rebound from what we saw in week 1 against Georgia. But here's a little nugget for you, Cooper. Kirby Smart has spent time with Pat Narduzzi studying all those different blitz schemes. So if Georgia could take that defense from offense from Clemson out of the game, hey, why can't Pittsburgh do it?
Yeah, that's a good point there. And they got a big test this week. SMU obviously don't want to look ahead to Clemson, but Drew can't wait for that matchup as well.